Whether you're installing cabinets in your own home or you're doing it professionally, chances are you're going to have to mount some cabinet hardware. In this video, I'll show you the right way to do it. The first step to installing cabinet hardware is to determine what style best suits you and your kitchen. There are a variety of options available. One of the more common options is this, a simple round knob. It mounts with one screw in the back. You could mount this knob on the face of a drawer or on the corner of a door. Another common option is a handle, such as this one. You could mount it likewise in the center of the drawer or on the corner of a door as well. This style can be particularly tricky because it uses two screws. In order for this style of cabinet pull or handle to look good, it must be balanced in the middle of the drawer, both horizontally and vertically. That's where things can get tricky. There are many different styles of jigs that you can and should use to properly install cabinet hardware. The simplest and cheapest version is this here. This particular style is designed to be placed on the corner of a door. Find where you think the cabinet hardware should be mounted and then drill the appropriate hole. I'm not a big fan of this kind of jig personally. I find if you are going to use it, it's best to just mark the hole. As you can see here in mine, I have actually drilled some holes, and since it is thin plastic, it does not hold up very much for continued use. If you are just doing one kitchen, your own kitchen, this might be perfectly fine. But for continued use, this really is not the best option. And they do make another style for mounting cabinet hardware on drawers as well, since this is made for doors. I'm not a big fan of that, therefore I don't even own one of those. But you can find them for just a few dollars at the local home center. Perhaps a better option is this style of jig here. This is made by Craig, and you can purchase it from a local retailer also. The concept is simple. You take the width of the drawer, you find center, you line this up, and with these holes and other guides already set, you're ready to drill. This jig is not bad. Do I think there's better options? Absolutely, I do. We'll get to that in just a moment, but for the common homeowner or do-it-yourselfer, this might be the best option due to its price. The first step to using a jig like that is to find your dimensions of the drawer. In this example, our drawer measures 18.5 inches wide. Now, one of the downfalls of this method is that you have to find the center of that point. Now, for some measurements, that might not be difficult. Most people could probably do 18.5 divided by 2 in their head and come up with 9.25. For our vertical dimension, it is 4.5. Similarly, 4.5 divided by 2 is 2.25. So we'll make a mental note of those for just a moment. It can be difficult whenever you're on a busy work site to divide those numbers in your head. But what I have found much easier at times is to use metric. I know that might not be a popular opinion with many individuals, but for me personally, I can divide 470 divided by 2, which I know to be 235 off the top of my head, a lot quicker than I can divide some more uncommon fractions. In the example, in this drawer face, the dimensions are in halves. Therefore, that's easy to divide. But in 16ths or even 8ths, that's not quite such an easy task. We know from our measurements that the drawer is 4.5 inches tall. And simple math tells us that 4.5 divided by 2 is 2.25. Here, on the Craig jig, on the back side, there are markings. This level here determines how high or low the cabinet pull will be. We want this handle to be mounted in the center of this cabinet. So 4.5 divided by 2 is 2.25, and the jig is already set there. 1, 2, 2.25. Now we'll flip the jig back around and look at the front. The next thing we want to do is make sure that the holes where we will drill are properly aligned for this cabinet pull. You can measure or visually reference these marks, and you can see that they are 3 inches apart. So we want to have this guide set on 3 inches as well as this one. The next thing we need to do is to determine the center of the drawer and place our jig there. So in this example, remember our drawer was 18.5 inches wide. 18.5 divided by 2 is 9.25. So we'll place the jig resting along the top of the door frame and then slide until the mark here in the middle of the jig reaches 9.25. Now, with one hand on the jig, we're ready to drill these holes. Nearly all cabinet screws mount with a machine thread screw. All cabinet hardware should be mounted with a 3/16 inch drill bit. This drill bit is the perfect size to allow the machine screw that goes into the cabinet knob or handle to pass through it freely. Once you've located the 3/16 inch drill bit, insert it into your drill, tighten the chuck, and now you're ready to go. It's important that the jig not move after you have located where it should be. The use of a Kreg face clamp, such as this one, is a good idea. It keeps the jig from moving unnecessarily, both as you let go of it and then as you drill the hole. This Kreg jig has served me well over many cabinet installs. I've had some issues with it at times, particularly with holes being misaligned with one another. But overall, it was probably operator error. It was my own fault. That said, I felt like there was a better way. This jig has its downfalls. For example, the holes where you drill, there and there, fit a 3-inch cabinet pole such as this one perfectly fine. This jig goes up to 5 inches. You can move those holes out up to 5 inches and drill your holes there. But in some higher end installations, you may find that 5 inches isn't nearly enough for the holes that you need. In some installations of my own, the holes may have been 2 feet apart with some very large cabinet hardware, and you're probably not going to find a jig that will help you to do that. You'll have to make something on your own. Another issue that I've had with the Kreg jig is the depth. You can drill a hole all the way from 1 inch down up to 5 inches down. So let me adjust this, and you can see that 5 inches would bring the holes down to here. That may seem like it's very low, but on some cabinets they have large drawer bases down below. 5 inches might not be nearly enough for what is needed. So this jig maxes out at 5 inches. If you have a large oven cabinet, that's not going to do the trick for you. In my continual quest to do things easier, faster, and ultimately better, I'm always looking for new tools, especially new jigs. Jigs are the key to speed in construction. Therefore, enter this. This is a product from Summerfield's, the Easy Mark. This jig costs about $70. Therefore, if you're just a homeowner or you casually are renovating your own home, this tool is probably not for you. But its features make it worth the price for a professional. One thing that I really appreciate about this tool is that you hardly have to measure anything and you don't have to do any math. Take a look at this drawer here. We don't need to know how wide it is. It doesn't matter. There are markings on each side of the jig and a stop here that allows you to reposition the jig quickly. So let's set this for this cabinet. I'll knock that off, reset this, and I'll just set it there. So you see the measurement here says 21. On this side it says 16. We want this to be centered so that they read the same. In this case, that's about 18.25. We have 18.25 here, 18.25 there. Our jig is already centered that direction. So in a typical installation, we may be doing multiple cabinets of this size. So you can move this bumper over, tighten it down. That will allow you to pick the jig up and set it down on another cabinet of the same size and get repeatability. That is a great asset. You only need to make one measurement to use this tool. So for that, we're going to take the height of our drawer, which again was 4.5 inches, and we're going to use that to set the height of this guide. The nice thing about the way this guide is set up is you don't have to do any math. Notice here in the center, there are markings for the height. But here's 6, here's 7, those are only 1/2 inch away from each other. That's because these are already set up in increments that allow you to not divide 4.5 divided by 2. So if we take this jig and we set it up here on 4.5, tighten it down, our holes are automatically going to be half that distance from the top, 2.25. Similar to the Craig jig, we need to set those 2 holes so that they are the right spacing for a pull like this. Now these are 3 inches on the handles and 3 inches, which is the minimum for this jig. If you have cabinet hardware that has holes spaced closer than 3 inches, this jig will not work for you. However, ironically, the Craig jig will. It works with 2.5 inch spaced hardware. Once you have these holes in proper alignment, double check that your hardware will fit them, and then, following the same process as before, take your drill, 3/16 drill bit, and drill those holes. Perhaps on a drawer front, you wish to just mount a simple pull like this right in the center. Well, this Summerfield's jig allows you to do that as well. There is a 3rd hole here in the middle that always stays centered. You don't adjust it left or right. You could just drill that hole and that knob will be right there ready for you. Going back to the Craig jig, it will allow you to do the same thing. We'll need to remove one of these inserts and put it there in the middle. So to do that, you flip over the tool and you unscrew the knob on the back that tightens it. You take it and you move it into the middle position, reinsert the nut, now you're ready to drill in the center hole. For me personally, the biggest advantage that the Summerfield jig has over the Craig jig or any other jig that I own for cabinet hardware is its ability to drill holes much lower on the drawer front. So let's see how low it can go. Unscrew this knob, lower the guide down, and you can see it maxes out at 14 inches. So this jig is capable of putting a hole, or 2 holes in this case, 7 inches down from the top. That would be centered on a 14-inch drawer. I do not believe I have ever seen a drawer face taller than 14 inches. Typically, I believe they're around 11 for the deepest of drawers. So this jig should suit me in just about anything that I need. Well, there you have it. Whether you're installing a simple knob like this or a more complicated handle, relying on 2 screws, you know the tricks to do a good job and get it centered every time.